Hi friends, I'm here to start reading a chapter book with you, but before I start that I wanted to let you know how much I miss seeing each of you every day, and also to remind you to get outside and play. Playing outside is so healthy, and it's healthy for your mind, it's healthy for your feelings, and it's healthy for your body. So make sure you get outside and play a lot. I've seen a lot of the children in my neighborhood riding their scooters and riding their bikes on the street and drawing with chalk on their driveways. So those are all kinds of fun things you can do outside. I'm sure y'all are finding some good things to do. The book that I'm going to start reading is called Mrs. Pigglewiggle. Some of you who were pre-Ks last year and are kindergartners now remember that Miss Amanda read this book. So that was a long time ago, so it'll be good to read it again and introduce the pre-Ks to this book. I'm probably going to read a little bit less than 15 minutes every time, just to try to find a happy middle between people's attention spans. All right. And also for parents, this book was written a long time ago, and I noticed there were some pretty not good stereotypes in this book, which is not unusual for books that were written around the 1950s. So I went ahead and changed those. All right, chapter 1. Mrs. Pigglewiggle herself. I expect I might as well begin by telling you all about Mrs. Pigglewiggle, so that whenever I mention her name, which I do very often in this book, you will not interrupt and ask, who is Mrs. Pigglewiggle? What does she look like? How big is she? How old is she? What color is her hair? Is her hair long? Does she wear high heels? Does she have any children? Is there a Mr. Pigglewiggle? Mrs. Pigglewiggle lives here in our town. She is very small and has a hump on her back. When children ask her about her hump, she says, "Oh, that's a big lump of magic." Sometimes it turns me into a witch, other times into a dwarf or a fairy, and on special occasions, it makes me into a queen. The children are all very envious of the hump because, besides being magic, it is such a convenient fastening place for wings. Mrs. Pigglewiggle has brown, sparkly eyes and brown hair, which she keeps very long, almost to her knees, so the children can comb it. She usually wears it on top of her head in a knot, unless someone has been combing it, and then she has braids or long wet curls or long hair just hanging, and with a jeweled crown or flowers on top. One day I saw her digging in her garden, wearing the jeweled crown and with her hair billowing down her back. She waved gaily and said, "I promised Betsy," Betsy is one of her children friends, "that I would not touch this hair until she came home from school." And then she went on with her digging. Mrs. Pigglewiggle's skin is a goldy brown, and she has a warm, spicy sugar cookie smell that is very comforting to children who are sad about something. Her clothes are all brown and never look crisp and pressed because they are used for dress up. She wears felt hats, which the children poke and twist into witches' and pirates' hats, and she does not mind that at all. Sunday mornings, she takes one of the hats off the closest shelf, gives it a few thumps, pulls it firmly down fore and aft, and wears it to church. She wears very high heels all the time and is glad to let the children borrow her shoes. Mrs. Pigglewiggle has no family at all. She says that her husband, Mr. Pigglewiggle, was a pirate, and after he had buried all of his treasure in the backyard, he died. She just has herself and Wag, her dog, and Lightfoot, her cat. The most remarkable thing about Mrs. Pigglewiggle is her house, because it's upside down. It is a little brown house, and sitting there in its tangly garden It looks like a small brown puppy lying on its back with its feet in the air. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle says that when she was a little girl, she used to lie in bed and gaze up at the ceiling and wonder what it would be like if the house were upside down. And so when she grew up and built her own house, she had built it upside down just to see. The bathroom, the kitchen, and the staircase are right side up. They are more convenient that way. You can easily see that you could not cook on an upside down stove or wash dishes on an upside down sink or walk up upside down stairs. In the living room of her house is a large chandelier, and instead of being on the ceiling, it is on the floor. Of course, it is really on the ceiling, but the ceiling is the floor, and so it is on the floor, and the children turn on the lights and then squat around it, pretending it is a campfire. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle says that her chandelier is the only one in town which is put to any real use. Her bedrooms all have slidey boards in them because if you look up at your own attic ceiling, you will see that a slanty ceiling, excuse me, when turned upside down, makes a fine slidey board. Also, all of the wall lights are very close to the floor and handy for small children. For the first 5 or 10 years after the house was built, Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle climbed in and out of her rooms over the high doorways, but now she has little steps which are just the thing to practice jumping. She gives the children chalk so they can mark on the rug how far they jump. Nobody knows how old Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle is. She says she doesn't know herself, because what difference does it make how old I am when I shall never grow any bigger? Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle's dog, Wag, has puppies every once in a while, and so she keeps a long list of names of children who want them on the blackboard in her kitchen. For Lightfoot the cat's kittens, she has a long waiting list on the blackboard in the dining room. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle's backyard is full of big holes where some children dig for Mr. Piggle-Wiggle's buried treasure. And her front yard is full of flowers, which some children pick. They put the flowers into vases and place them around her living room or take them into their teachers at school. Every child in town is a friend of Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle's, but she knows very few of their parents. She says grown-ups make her nervous. For the first year after she built her house, Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle lived there all by herself, except for Wag and Lightfoot, and she was very lonely. Then, one dark, rainy afternoon, when she was baking sugar cookies and thinking how much fun it would be if she knew someone besides Wag and Lightfoot to invite for tea, she happened to look out her kitchen window, and there coming up the street in the pouring rain, dragging a big suitcase and bawling, was a little girl. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle wiped the flour off her hands and hurried right out into the rain and invited the little girl in for tea. The little girl's name was Mary Lou Robertson, and she was 8 years old, and she was running away from home. She told Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle all this after she had drunk 3 cups of cambric tea and eaten 7 sugar cookies. She said, "I'm running away from home because I hate to wash dishes. All I do is wash dishes. I am just a servant. Dishes, dishes, dishes. Wash, dry, put away. That's all I do. My mother doesn't love me at all. She isn't my real mother anyway. She probably got me out of an orphanage just to wash her dishes." Mary Lou began to cry again, so that the 8th sugar cookie got quite soggy before she finished it. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle said, "Isn't she your real mother?" Mary Lou said, "She says she is, but no real mother would make you wash dishes." Wash dishes! "Now that's a funny thing," said Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle. "I mean, you're hating to wash dishes so much. Because you see, I like to wash dishes. In fact, I enjoy washing dishes so much that a cause of great sorrow to me is the fact that the only dishes I must wash are for Wag, Lightfoot, and me. 3 or 4 dishes a meal. That is all. When I wash dishes, Mary Lou, I pretend that I am a beautiful princess with long, dark brown, curly hair and milk chocolate colored skin and almond colored eyes. I have been captured by a wicked witch, and my only chance to get free is to wash every single dish and have the whole kitchen sparkly clean before the clock strikes. For when the clock strikes, the witch will come down to inspect, to see if there is a crumb anywhere. If there are pots and pans that have been put away wet, if the silverware has been thrown in the drawer, or if the sink has not been scrubbed out, the witch will have me in her power for another year. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle looked at the clock and jumped up. It is 10 minutes to 4, Princess, and we have so much to do. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Mary Lou also jumped up and began carrying the tea things to the sink, and Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle whisked them in and out of the dishwater, and Mary Lou dried them, and Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle hurried as fast as she could and put the cookie things away, and every once in a while she would stop and say, "Hark, Princess! Do you hear the thump of the witch's big gnarly cane?" Then Mary Lou, her braids bobbing up and down with excitement, would say, "I hear it, Princess. It is coming closer and closer." Soon the kitchen sparkled. The dishes were washed and dried and put away, and every crumb had been swept from the floor. Mary Lou even curled Lightfoot's tail neatly around her legs and smoothed Wag's fur. Just before the clock struck, Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle said to Mary Lou, "Princess, I must leave you now, but show the witch your work, and oh, I do hope you will be freed." Then she went upstairs, and pretty soon down the stairs came a terrible old witch with a long black dress and a tall black hat and a big gnarly black cane. Mary Lou was very scared until she saw the sparkly eyes of Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle under the hat. She showed the witch the kitchen, and the witch took out the cookie pans and carried them over to the light to see if they were clean and dry. She got down on her knees, squeaking like a rusty gate, to see if Mary Lou had swept under the stove. She felt inside the teacups to see if there was sugar in the bottoms, and she put on her glasses to examine the sink. But she could not find anything wrong, so she handed Mary Lou the key to the kitchen door and screeched out, "You are free, Princess, but I will get you again, never fear." The witch clumped back up the stairs, and in a few minutes came down Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle. All right, so I think this is a good place to stop, and I will try to do this every day. It's great to see you all. Thank you for joining me for our reading number 1 of Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle. See you next time.